Welcome to Starkey Sound Bites. I'm your host, Dave Fabry, the Chief Hearing Health Officer for Starkey. So if you want to learn about all the latest in hearing technology, and also, it's been said that data is the new oil, and data technologies really, you're the miner, if you will, of the oil. And I have with me today Dr. Golbarg Mehraei, who is our team lead of the data technology group at Starkey, where she drives the development of data-driven and AI-powered technology that has been in our products now since around 2018, and that predates when you joined Starkey, Golbarg. So thank you for joining us today on Sound Bites.
Thank you for inviting me, Dave.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. So start by talking a little bit about yourself. Talk about your education, and then talk about how it is that you found us.
Sure. So I have a background. I started off as an electrical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing signal processing work, and as I was finishing up my master's, I wanted to do something more applied, and that's where I started to get into the auditory field. And I was just really fascinated by our ability to be able to disentangle different types of sounds, like listening to a certain person in a crowded room or picking out an instrument in a song, for example. And so, that sort of fascination with what we call auditory scene analysis really drove me into studying auditory neuroscience for my PhD. And so I, was part of the health science technology program at MIT, and the focus was in hearing and speech sciences. And there, my focus was primarily on trying to understand the neural mechanisms of how do we process sounds, how are we able to pay attention to one type of sound over another, and more importantly, how does this degrade with noise exposure, aging, and whether we can find signatures of this in the clinical test that we develop, so for early intervention. So that's really what I worked on. That was sort of the bread and butter of my academic career. And then in industry, I started to do more data mining, large data sets, trying to in biotech, trying to understand what patients will benefit from certain types of therapies. So that's where I started to leverage very large data sets to identify patient profiles and glean insight from data in various different types of indications, not just hearing. But
Yeah. So when you began then, and my scene analysis knowledge really stems from Bregman and sort of thinking about auditory streaming from that perspective. So typically for what we're doing requires 2 ears, and in terms of locating those sounds to then, and it is amazing, and we take it for granted with normal hearing that if we were in a noisy restaurant and we were conversing and someone started gossiping some juicy tidbits over on one side, you can just divide your attention really without turning your head, but then taking it into consideration the input at the different ears and the ability to just analyze the scene to pick up that voice when normally we can also suppress it.
Exactly.
And so, but also knowing that within the normal hearing individual and getting input from the 2 ears, that's very different than when we have a hearing loss.
Yeah.
And so when you did your work for your dissertation, were you working with those with hearing loss, or were you working with normal hearing individuals, or a little bit of both?
So I was working with both, but in terms of people with potential hearing loss, what we call hidden hearing loss.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are individuals who have had continued noise exposure, but if you go into a clinical setting, their audiograms are normal, but yet they report having trouble with speech and noise environments. And so we wanted to understand whether there were neural biomarkers of what this hidden hearing loss is about. So specifically, in animal studies, they had shown that the auditory nerve gets damaged and dies over time. And so this reduction in our ability to encode these complex sounds takes a toll on our ability in these more speech and noise environments, or where environments that have many different sound sources. And so we really focused on trying to find these neural biomarkers more in the brainstem, and also in more a central auditory system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that hidden hearing loss certainly has been the topic for quite some time, but certainly in the widespread sort of non-necessarily even just the lay public, people have been focused on it a lot lately, not only because of central auditory processing issues, but with the aging individual, speaking as one, where even though my thresholds haven't changed much, as I get older, more birthdays, more trips around the sun, I will have difficulty in the same types of environments that I was quite proficient in before. And so that aging of the brain, or even of the auditory nerve, something that is decidedly not peripheral, because we talk about a lot of times that the audiogram is a pretty blunt instrument, and normal audiometric thresholds, that is across the range that we test from 250 to 8,000 hertz, having thresholds that are 20 decibels or better, doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have difficulty, hence the hidden hearing loss.
Yeah, precisely. So the audiogram is really just a glimpse of, or a piece of the puzzle in the broader system. And like you said, over time with aging, it doesn't necessarily have to be noise exposure. You can have these issues which essentially can increase cognitive effort. So
Yeah.
It's harder for you to listen to somebody, and your brain is just reallocating, effort to have you listen to an individual in a conversation, for example, and taking away resources from other areas of the brain.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
And that cognitive effort has really been an area of keen focus for these individuals who are saying, I have difficulty. Many, and obviously most of the people listening to Sound Bites are hearing care professionals, audiologists or dispensers. Every one of them, I guarantee you, has a pair of patients who have similar audiometric thresholds, who perform very differently on the unaided tasks, and even get varying degrees of benefit from their hearing aids. And that's really sort of the puzzle in itself, is how do we provide tools, guidance to clinicians to be able to identify individuals who are going to struggle more and maybe require more signal processing and things like that than someone else who might otherwise have really good brain functioning and not have that evidence of hidden hearing loss.
Exactly, yeah. And it's always fascinating to me how two people, with the same type of hearing loss profile, that's reflected in the audiogram, could have very different challenges in the real world. So there is a lot of variability in how people hear, or how people essentially process their sound, even if your hearing profile is quite similar, from one person to another. So it's always interesting to me that lot of variability across the population.
Yeah, and given that we're using a threshold-based measure, I mean, in vision, obviously they do some threshold-based testing, in the sense that if in somebody that has had a lifelong visual issue, I mean, they'll put me in and do a field test where I have to click a button when I see lights coming from different directions. So it's sort of a combination of a threshold measure and a spatial measure, but then they also test acuity. Yeah. Clinical measures today, and then we're going to pivot to your current role, but I'm intrigued by your past role with working on hidden hearing loss and with the auditory system, that what measures would you say that clinicians today should consider beyond the audiometric threshold measures to sort of sort out those profiles of patients, one who may have more hidden hearing loss and the other who may have more just a peripheral loss, but otherwise with an intact auditory system and a young brain, let's say?
Sure, yeah. So there are a couple of candidates where academic research has found potential in them, and part of it, actually one of them is the audiogram, but looking at more higher frequency regions beyond the 8 kilohertz that's standard in practice. So there was some evidence that degradation or loss in these supra high frequency regions can be indicative of difficulty in speech and noise environments that may be related to hidden hearing loss. The other measures are more brainstem related. So looking at the auditory brainstem, I'm getting a little technical
That's
here,
okay.
but yeah. So the wave 1 amplitude of the auditory brainstem, which stems from the auditory nerve, can be an indication of neural damage at that level. And so these are sort of measures that can be quickly done in the clinic. And there are obviously more involved measures that are, again, more neural signal coding that can be done in the clinic, but they need to be revised so that they're quick, because you don't have the patient in the office for an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah, many of our listeners are in very busy clinics or retail operations where they're seeing many patients, and that's always been the limitation, is really being able to tap into some of that more sophisticated testing, but it does take time, and time is money for many of these folks. What's your perspective on speech and noise testing? We've had measures, clinical measures for speech and noise testing, but there's been relatively low adoption by a lot of clinicians, despite the fact that there have been quite a few studies that have shown some potential benefit of speech and noise to be able to differentiate those individuals who struggle more in noise than others.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure about why there has been, I guess, poor adoption of the speech and noise. There's a variety of speech and noise measures. So I think there are ways that you can trigger out more of these subtle nuances of people having difficulty in hearing that may not be captured in just adding speech and changing the signal to noise ratio. There's the localization piece as well that is important. And so having a speech and noise test that sort of encompasses some of the more dynamic settings of a real world environment, I think is more important. And I don't know enough whether those sort of tests have been sort of laid out and standardized in the clinic.
The latest product that Starkey has to offer has a lot of your fingerprints on it, in the sense that with Omega AI, we're incorporating and introducing a feature, if you will, TeleHear AI. Unpack that a little bit for us, because this is really a new to market feature to Starkey and to the industry. Talk a little bit about what it is that your team has done to develop TeleHear AI.
Yeah, so I consider it a feature. It is an advanced feature that leverages generative AI to provide real-time support to the patient in the field.
So generative AI, for some who don't understand that, can you unpack that a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So generative AI is considered a class of artificial intelligence that creates new data points, such as text or images or even music. And it does this by being trained on very large data sets and learning the relationship and the patterns in that data set, and then inferring from those patterns to create new content.
Okay.
It's different from classical machine learning, where machine learning algorithms are often based on one particular task, like classification or making a prediction. And so this is more generative, essentially, more generalized to a lot of different tasks, essentially. So we're leveraging generative AI. We created an AI clinical assistant where users can essentially use natural conversational language to describe any issues or questions that they may have that's related to their hearing aid. This feature is part of our TeleHear suite features on our My Starkey mobile app. And so as a user, as a hearing aid user, I can go in and say to this AI assistant, I'm having trouble hearing my child. And the AI assistant will be able to interpret my input, ask some clarifying questions, such as, is it all the time, or do you have more difficulty in noisy environments? And by sort of that back and forth conversation, it's able to identify my problem. And then once it does that, then it will provide guidance on how I can resolve this problem, or if it deems appropriate, will provide a set of new hearing aid adjustments for me to try out. So the next time I'm listening to my daughter, I will basically try these new settings and compare it to my original settings. And if I like it, I update my personal program with these new settings that were provided. The nice thing about this is you can, if you change your mind at a later time, say, okay, this doesn't fulfill my needs, always revert back to the original settings that your hearing care professional had set for you on your hearing aids.
That's a great feature.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to be on part of the team that originally was thinking about, well, what are the most common types of concerns or complaints that first-time hearing aid users might have? And it's often, children's voices, loud sounds, water running, things like that, and really prioritizing a list. And you've really expanded that list to then enable this in a fashion. We've had in our hearing aids for a while the capability to say, turn my hearing aids up, change to the outdoor program if I have one. But this is going way beyond that by saying and identifying in a specific situation, I cannot hear my grandchild. And then, as you said, it may, in a conversational manner, isolate. Is it a young child? Is it a female or male voice? Yep. And then try to make adaptations with guardrails, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have, and that's a good point that you make, that all of our solutions are based on clinical best practice. So we follow all of the safety guidelines that we have set in place in our fitting software, some in this feature as well, because we essentially don't want to make the person's hearing worse, or right. cause new issues. And so we have been very mindful when developing this feature. And it is the first time that we're making automated hearing aid adjustments. And for the user to try out and update if they choose to. So it is a little bit different from our previous features. Yeah. But again, as I mentioned, this information is shared with our clinicians, so they see all of that activity about what changes were made, what problems did the user describe to TeleHear AI, and so they can use that information on if they have a follow-up meeting with their hearing care professional. They can really build on that information and make further fine-tuning there if needed.
So as you said, the patient has the opportunity to try new settings based on their concerns. They can undo it. It doesn't necessarily remain if they change their mind and feel as though the way that the professional had programmed them initially was better. But it really does now start to take into consideration that patients' listening environments or the types of individuals that they want to hear. And those insights you said are shared. Do we sort of keep track what types of queries they're making as they're related to voices or loud sounds or anything like that to aggregate those insights to provide to the clinician?
Yeah, so in our first version of this, we, if our feature is unable to solve the user's issue, we connect them with their hearing care professional. And then that chat history is essentially shared with the clinician. So they can see what did the person query for, what was their hearing concern, and then go from there. But you could imagine that over time, we can essentially aggregate, like, what are the complaints that our individuals having. And interestingly, what we can do with this is the TeleHear AI can start to learn the commonality across these problems, right? So, and then over time to understand, like, maybe how to make adjustments based on these problems and their underlying pattern of, are there certain sound characteristics are the same across different problems, and then make those appropriate adjustments.
Yeah, so going back to the beginning of our discussion when you were talking about hidden hearing loss and some of the work of your past, that not only within the individual, we're providing the information to the professional to say, look, they appear to be struggling in these types of situations with these types of voices or this type of acoustic environment more commonly. But then we can look at those for insights across different professionals as well for Starkey to be able to continue to improve the way that we classify sounds, the way that we adapt our noise management or directional microphone settings for a category of patients. So not only within the individual, as you said, We put guardrails that allow them to make adjustments, and then we refer them to the professional if it looks like we're heading into an area where we don't want to over amplify or do no harm is always our first objective. But then also the other fun part for your job with the data intelligence and the analytics is to try to develop new insights out of audiometric parameters or something related to additional factors that might be at play here across additional patients. So it helps the whole organization as well as the individual, while also empowering that individual to make some adjustments if they wish, but never for a minute forgetting that it's the relationship between the patient and the provider that's really essential, and we're trying to provide insights, additional insights to them.
Yeah, precisely. And I think this feature is a tool for not only a tool for the user, but also for the clinician as well. And so, this feature is meant to make real-time, it's real-time adjustments and provide real-time support. And I think, while fine-tuning and clinical adjustments made by a hearing care professional in a clinic is considered the gold standard, there are some practical challenges, such as if somebody comes into the clinic, there might be scheduling difficulty. They might be very far away from their hearing care professional, or they might not recall what their problem was 2 weeks ago. Or, and I think importantly, the clinical environment cannot mimic the complex acoustic environments that we face on a daily basis. So the clinician will take their most educated, guess and adjustment. They'll make those adjustments based on the user's problem. The user will go into the field and then try them. If everything works out, if it's improvement, that's great. If not, they'll have to come back in with further fine-tuning. And what's really nice about this feature is that it provides these adjustments for the user to try out in those real-world environments. And then it's shared with the clinician to say, okay, this worked, this didn't work, let's fine-tune further from that.
Yeah, so it prevents redundancies from the clinician to try to make the same adjustments that the patient's already tried.
Exactly.
I've been a huge fan of telehealth, our TeleHear program, for a long time, because in many cases, clinicians, if they're distant or if they have to make arrangements to have someone take them into the professional to see them, TeleHear now puts the power of that in their smartphone to connect with their devices and connect with their professional to make adjustments. TeleHear AI is really that next level, because now it empowers the patient, the end user, to actually address in the moment, without the need to connect up with a TeleHear session with their professional, to make an adjustment on the fly in the environment where they are. Then we share those insights with the professional so that they know and can learn from how the patient asked the question, had the adjustments applied, and then hopefully improve the response. So in many cases, I said, well, TeleHear helped address smaller problems that patients would otherwise just live with it.
Exactly.
This TeleHear AI takes that to the next degree by empowering the patient to work with that generative AI solution to provide adjustments to common complaints to augment what the professional is doing in developing the relationship.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
That's a really cool feature.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your taking the time to talk technical a little bit about your role and your background.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, and I'm happy to be part of the Starkey team and make these visions a reality.
Well, we're fortunate to have you. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and review and share with your friends. As I said, AI can sometimes be a challenging topic to talk about in terms of the complexities involved. But Golbarg, I really think you have a way of being able to explain in simple terms what's going on underneath the hood of our technology, and look forward to seeing and hearing more of you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.